You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Welcome in, everybody. Ethan here.
Mike here.
And welcome to the Blue Note Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Blues. It's episode number 13.
Yeah, that's right. It's the Bill Guerin episode. Surprisingly enough, there's actually only been 8 Blues players who have ever worn the number 13. That's it. And most of them did not perform very well. So, I'm just going to give a quick shout out here to Billy Guerin. He was 36 years old whenever he played with the Blues, wearing here number 13, 28 goals, 47 points in 61 games, including 6 game-winning goals. So, he's doing a hell of a job here up in Minnesota. And I just want to give a quick shout out here to him, episode number 13.
Yeah, we'll get into what Minnesota did. They've pretty much made the biggest move as we go around the Central Division here soon. But Bill Guerin, great player, won a cup in Pittsburgh. Really good. Didn't do much with the Blues, like you said. Didn't play very much, but 28 goals is pretty good. And you had some other guys like Ray Ferraro and a lot of those guys that barely played any games for the Blues.
Right. Kyle Clifford.
Most recently Kyle Clifford. So, yeah, maybe the Blues will acquire somebody this summer that wears number 13. Who knows? But all right, let's get into it. Before we get into it, I'd like to thank the listeners and wish everyone a happy Independence Day to all of our friends in the United States who are listening to the podcast. Just hit that subscribe button. It's a little plus button you'll see on the pages of any podcast platform that you find us on. So you don't miss a single show. You can give us a 5-star rating if you love what we're doing. Leave us a comment, get involved with the conversation on Twitter over at TBNPod, and share the podcast on social media so other Blues fans can find us as well. We're very thrilled with the numbers we got in the last episode, number 12. Stephen Ground of the 2G1C podcast co-hosting for me. I was out last week, so that was a great job by him to help us out. And very thrilled with episode 12. But before we get into it, let's just, thank him for that. And now we get into episode 13. And let's take a trip around the Central Division, which there's been some things going on with a few teams, some teams not doing anything. I think the teams that are on the bottom of the board when it comes to the Central are the ones that are a little bit quiet before the draft. They got to prepare for the draft. One of those teams is the Chicago Blackhawks, who very sadly don't have their first round pick. That's a shame. But a team like Arizona, a little bit different for them. But neither of those teams have done anything, but the Colorado Avalanche have.
Yeah, as we broke it here on the podcast last week, they are, of course, the Stanley Cup winners. Huge congratulations here to them. I mean, like in all sincerity, all the huge congratulations going across the board here. Epic season. In their first month, this is shocking whenever I looked at this. Their first month, the month of October, the Avs were 4-4. If you remember here looking back at this, there were a lot of people who were kind of worried here about the Avalanche throughout that first month. But then the calendar flipped to November, and after that, the team went 52-15-7. That's a 750 winning percentage. For frame of reference here, only 4 teams finished with a record above 700 throughout the entire season. The Florida Panthers were 744 here on the season. The Avs at 726, the Hurricanes at 707, and the Leafs at 701. So again, sincere congratulations here to just an amazing team, an amazing job here by Joe Sakic on assembling here this team, the performance here that they all had. Congratulations here to the Stanley Cup winners.
Yeah, I mean, they don't appear to have that much respect for the cup, given that they've dented it about 5 or 6 times. But whatever,
a good old time,
I suppose. But yeah, I think they had some early season injury issues, if I remember correctly. I know the Blues beat them in the first game of the season. I want to say McKinnon and maybe one of the other top liners was out in that game, but I don't remember. But I mean, either way, we knew how good this team was. I think this is a long time coming that they would win one eventually, and they could win more. Who knows? But they were dominant. I just think Tampa ran out of gas late because the final game of the series, Tampa came flying out, and they were all over them. They got after it, scored the first, and then Colorado kind of completely dominated the game from there on out. So a well-deserved cup. You go 16-4. That's as legit as it gets, pretty much. Not going to see much better than that. But it is nice that the Blues were able to beat them twice, and the Blues were very, very close to forcing a Game 7 against them. if they didn't kind of crumble late in the third period. But that's what the great teams do, and the Avalanche were able to capitalize on that in every single situation possible. So congrats to them. All right, let's do the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, they signed a trio of 1-year, 2-way contracts here for Riley Tuft, Ryan Shea, and Joseph Sekoni. I really apologize if I butchered that last name here, but Sekoni is the abbreviation that they give me, so that's what I'm going with. They also extended veteran goaltender Scott Wedgwood here to a 2-year extension worth $1 million here per season. He's going to likely serve here as the backup to Jake Ottinger here next season. Wedgwood here actually went 3-1-3 in 8 appearances last season with a 3.04 goals against average and a .913 save percentage here with Dallas. So not a bad option here for them to be able to rely here upon with Jake Ottinger. And of course, Otter here still looking for his next contract at this point, but boy, oh boy, I think they've got something very interested, at least in Jake Ottinger. Again, Scott Wedgwood here was their trade deadline acquisition, and he will be with the Dallas Stars here for about the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, I'm not sure any team in the league is at as weird of a goaltending situation as the Stars in the last 3 or 4 seasons, because you start 2019, you have Bishop, get you to the second round, game 7, almost stole it against the Blues. And then you get to the Stanley Cup final in 2020 with Hudobin. And then you sign Holtby. He doesn't really do much for you. Now you finally bring Ottinger up, who was a 2017 first-round pick, I believe. I think he was in the Robert Thomas draft, if I remember correctly. So you finally get him, and he's the real deal. Like, we saw that against Calgary, almost stole that series. He's legit. Wedgwood is a solid backup. I don't think Wedgwood's going to play very much if Ottinger's healthy. But it's just been very weird, the goaltending situation in Dallas over the last few seasons, as has the coaching situation. Because obviously the whole Montgomery thing, what he went through, he gets let go, and they bring in Rick Bowness. They had a lot of success with him. Now he gets let go.
Yep.
And then they bring in Pete DeBoer, I believe. Is that who they hired? Yeah.
Yep.
There's so many different coaching changes. It's getting ridiculous at this point.
There's a lot, especially just in the Central Division. And yes, Ottinger here, he was the 2017 26 overall draft pick here by the Stars. Yeah. So
now, do the Sharks, did they fill their opening, or did they just, because they just fired Bob Bugner?
I don't believe they've hired anybody here just as of yet, but I could be wrong. Like you said, there's been a slew of hirings here within the NHL just within like the last week, and it's remarkable.
That's a weird firing, because they didn't really give him much to work with in San Jose. I know they've been pretty brutal his 3 seasons there, but that is odd. But maybe, I guess, if you make that move, you kind of expect that you're going to be in a situation where you like somebody who's out there, since everything else is filled, so you can get whoever you want. I don't know. That's weird. Let's do the biggest one, which is the Minnesota Wild and what they did last week.
Oh boy. Yep. They're officially under the cap crunch here at this point. So they traded Kevin Fiala to the Los Angeles Kings for the 19th overall draft pick and prospect Brock Faber, as they enter here again in that cap crunch couple of seasons as a result of buying out the contracts here of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. Boy, it's going to be rough here for them. This season, it's going to be just over $12 million in dead cap space. And then the following 2 seasons here at $14 million. We're going to be talking to somebody here with the Minnesota Wild here about this and these upcoming couple of seasons. But boy, oh boy, it's going to be interesting to see what the Wild are able to do here with this. But I do like their acquisition. I like the trade. There's not much that they're going to be able to get here with a guy, who's an RFA at that point, but 19th overall, I think, especially like in this draft, they're going to be able to get hopefully something. They may end up packaging it here together with something else in addition to it, but it's not too bad here for them. Not too bad.
I don't know if I'd define my take on this trade as strong, but I honestly don't like this trade at all for Minnesota. Now, I know that they needed to do something with their salary cap issues. Now, the Suter and Parise thing is their problem. Like, it's their fault. Yeah. I guess I don't think they really had to do it, at least for Suter. I don't think you had to buy him out. I think he could have contributed, especially with the like Kulikov and Goligoski did nothing for them in the playoffs last year. I think Suter could have done more. Of course, the cap number was pretty high, of course, but I just 19th overall pick. You don't know what you're going to get there. That's fine. You'll probably find somebody. I don't think Faber is going to be that good. That's just what I think of him. I don't think he projects as all that much. And Fiala is a bona fide scorer, and he didn't play with Kaprizov that much, so you can't use that against him. And I just think it's a perfect. I obviously like this trade a lot more for LA than I hate it for Minnesota. But I don't love it for Minnesota. I just don't think that's enough for a guy like Fiala. I know he didn't do anything in the playoffs, and he's kind of underperformed in the playoffs in some regard, but I don't think he got enough. I don't think Faber is the prospect that some people think he is, and I don't think the 19th overall pick it's obviously not a sure thing, and you're not going to get a guy there that's going to be ready within the next year or two, probably.
No,
Fiala is a stud, and the Kings extension, it's always going to be viewed as questionable when the numbers are that big, but I really like this for LA because think about this. There's no shortage of centers for him to play with there, whether it's Kopitar or Deneau or eventually Byfield or Turcotte. They have the centers for a guy like Fiala. So I think he's a great fit there. I don't think Minnesota got enough, but it's an understanding move given the salary cap situation for them and how bad it's going to be with the way that you laid it out. It's going to be bad. That's why them getting out of the first round last season was pretty much a must, and they couldn't do it. Now, the good thing for them is that they have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds, so you can figure that out. They got the Canucks second round pick, which is 47th. That was in the when Arizona got Vancouver's 47th pick in the OEL and Garland trade. And then Jack McBain got traded from Minnesota to Arizona for that pick. So they have 47. They have, 47. Trying to find the other pick here in the second round. 47. And it's not even telling me compensatory pick, whatever. Then they have 19, and then they have 24. So they got an opportunity to get some prospects in that pool. But you look at their cap space right now, it's 6.5 mil. So you probably weren't going to re-sign Fiala anyway, but let's think about this for a second. Other than Kaprizov, you have Zuccarello, who was very good and is very good with Kaprizov, 6 mil next 2 seasons.
He's aging very fast, very quickly.
Eric Sinek, 5.25 mil. You're going to keep him. My question is, what if you mix things up and you trade a Foligno or a Greenway to keep somebody like Fiala? Because do you think that Foligno and Greenway are going to be as good as Fiala is going to be for that long? That's $3 million more you could have freed up. And then think about their defensive core. How do you justify keeping Spurgeon, Dumba, and Brodin right now all together? That right there is 19.5 mil in their cap. That's 3 defensemen, and none of them are really world beaters by any stretch. That's an issue I think the Blues are going to eventually run into with Falk, Krug, and Parayko. That's why I don't think that they're going to be able to as easily make a move as people think. So I just think that they probably weren't going to re-sign Fiala, but I still don't think he got enough. And I think the reason they didn't get enough is probably because of the playoff performance, of the situation of LA knowing that Minnesota is in this situation where they have to trade him. But I just don't think Faber in a first is enough. I could be wrong. I just don't love the trade for them.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, they definitely would have needed to trade 2 to 3 guys in order to be able to make the salary work for them here moving forward, or be able to sort of backload the contract, whatever that was going to end up being. I mean, they may have been able to find something to be able to do here for it, but it definitely was not going to be easy here for him. So, it was definitely tough, I think, for the Wild to be able to move on from a guy like Kevin Fiala. As a Blues fan, I'm saying, go on, please get out of here at that point. So I don't mind that. But yeah, for Minnesota fans, I'm sure that was a tough swallow. And I do agree, getting back what they got back probably wasn't enough. I mean, it's probably the same thing, the New York Rangers fans here were thinking Buchnevich here was leaving, and then they get back Sammy Blais.
The other thing is, like, think about a team like LA, how many young players they have that are ready to play. that you could have gotten at 800,000. Like that's the issue here. Like I know that they weren't going to move on from Byfield or Kaliev in this trade, but Rasmus Kupari, I don't think that's out of the equation to trade for him. Or what if you trade for one of their lower tier younger RFAs like Gabriel Velarde or Elias Anderson's bounced around the NHL.
Yeah.
So maybe a younger player who's actually ready to play. I don't think Faber's going to be ready to play for a little bit.
No.
And I don't think he projects as being as good as a lot of people think he might have been when he first was drafted. Now, he kind of screams like really good college player, not as good in the NHL to me. I could be wrong, but I just think that there was different avenues for them to go about this, but I think getting it done as quickly as possible is the right move by Guerin. So I think that that's fine. So we'll see. Let's do Nashville now, who kind of did a little something today that was relevant to the Blues.
Yeah, they acquired 33-year-old defenseman Ryan McDonough for defenseman Philip Myers and prospect forward Grant Mismash, should I say. First of all, one of the best hockey names I've ever heard in my entire life, Grant Mismash. The only reason why I knew of who he was due to a dynasty league that I used to be in. Other than that, I would have been looking at this trade saying there's no way in the world that there's a guy named Grant Mismash. And it just blows my mind. I, for one, am extremely happy that it's Nashville that takes on this contract, because it's way too much money here at this point, in excess of $6 million here at this point. What was it? 4 more years? 4 more years here still left on it, over $6 million. He can still play top 4, even top pairing left side defense at this point. It's great, but boy, that's a big old contract to be able to have at 33 years old, and a full no trade clause. So even if the Blues wanted to try and move out here from underneath of it, he owns the Blues at that point. So I wanted to stay away from that thing with a 39.5-foot pole. And I'm so glad that the Blues stayed away here from it. And if it's Nashville that takes on that contract, good. Let them take on that contract.
I would agree. We had a very interesting chat about this whole McDonough thing in the Blues Hockey Writers chat. Yeah, I wrote an article the day before, 2 days ago, I think, that was saying 3 reasons the Blues shouldn't trade for McDonough. The contract's a big deal. I still think he's a really, really good player.
Sure. Right now.
His production has not been very good in the regular season over the last few seasons, but I think he would have been a great fit from a player perspective. But like you said, 4 years left. He'll be 37 when that deal's done. $6.75 million. I think for Nashville, this is just a kind of a signal that they want to win, because you got to re-sign Forsberg, or there's really no point in this deal. And right now their cap space is $18.1 million. I think the issue with Forsberg is the term?
Probably the term.
It's always the term with these guys. He seems like I'd give him an 8-year deal. If you're trying to win, I think he'll be fine at 8 years. Now, the other problem that you run into is you got Duchesne for 4 more years and Johansson for 3 more years at $8 million apiece. So if you could do 8 years and not have to give Forsberg a ton, that'd be fine for them. But I think if you don't re-sign Forsberg, then this move seems kind of dumb to me.
Yeah. Well, and the thing, from what I'm gathering, and I could be off here on this, I think that it's Nashville that wants term, and I don't know if Forsberg wants term here at this point. He wants the money, but I think that he is very skeptical about signing long-term with Nashville. Again, I could be off on that, but from everything that I've been reading, David Poile is the one who wants to sign him 8 years. He wants to give him the term. He wants to give him the money. I don't think that it's Forsberg that wants to sign long-term in Nashville. So again, I could be off on that, but looking over at, some of these different contracts of what is happening here in Nashville, he's 27. If I'm him, I am wanting to be able to line myself up with Matt Duchesne and Ryan Johansson, as they've got roughly 3 more seasons. You've got Matt Duchesne, who's got 4 more. But other than that, there's not a lot of certainty here at this point. So if I give myself 3 more seasons, that's going to put me at about 30 to 31 years old where I can really hit the open market. So I think term, maybe Nashville is wanting to commit and say, hey, we want a long-term relationship here. Please take my pin. And I think Forsberg is the one who's saying, let's talk again here in a couple of years and let's see what's happening, because I may want to be able to sign elsewhere and find something a little bit better, of something that I can be able to win a cup with.
Yeah. It seems like the seat is pretty hot for David Poile in Nashville, who's been there for about 1 billion years. I think the asking price for Forsberg is in the low 8s.
Yeah.
Which, if you're him, you just had 42 goals. You had 26 goals in 14-15. You had 33 in 15-16, 31 in 16-17, 26 in 17-18, 28 in 18-19, 21 in 19-20. 84 points last season, 42 goals. He deserves a big payday. And he can't be making less than Duchesne or Johansson, because Johansson has pretty much been pretty bad for that contract for
both of them.
3 seasons now, maybe
both
4 seasons.
Yep.
And Duchesne last season was very good, but he hasn't looked great. He had 13 points in 34 games in 2020-21. He did have 86 points last year, but 3 seasons into that contract, not looking great.
No.
But yeah, Forsberg should get paid. And if you're a Blues fan, like you said, you definitely don't want him there. So
no.
But this move signals to me that they got to it feels like a last minute thing. They'll probably get it done. I would guess 8 years, 8.5 mil. If not 8 years, then 6 years or 7 years. I think Nashville is going to try to get that up as much as possible, but I don't think it'll be more than what Roman Yossi's making. So we'll see what happens there. The McDonough move, though, I think signals to me that they're wanting to win.
Yeah.
And we'll see. Okay, final team, the Winnipeg Jets.
They found their new bench boss, former Dallas Stars head coach, Rick Bowness, new head coach here over there. It's going to be interesting to see what Rick Bowness is going to be able to bring. I think he's going to be able to really help tighten up that defensive structure here quite a bit. But, boy, they still have a lot of pieces that they got to figure out, especially here at their forward core. Here, like we alluded to in the last podcast, they've still got Kyle Connor. They've still got Mark Scheifele. They've still got plenty of these guys. But, boy, oh, boy, they've got so many different question marks, so many different underperforming players. You always can be able to compete here with a guy like Connor Hellebuck. It's Rick Bowness is a good hire. I think he's the right hire here at this point, but they just have a lot of internal things that they need to be able to address here first and foremost. So I hope that it's a guy like Rick Bowness who can be able to help continue to progress this team and can keep helping moving this team here along. Because, again, like I alluded to here last week with Steven, was I have the utmost respect for Winnipeg. They're the Jets, their fans. Like I have no complaints here about them, and their team especially just seems like that they're completely upbeat, world class. And I just hope that you can be able to see potentially one day a cup come here to Winnipeg again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This just feels like, just looking at this move, this is like one of the all-time recycling summers in the NHL. Boston hires Jim Montgomery, who I think deserves it. We'll talk about that soon.
Yep.
Chicago did go with Luke Richardson, who hasn't been an NHL coach. Dallas goes with Pete DeBoer. Red Wings go with Derek Lalonde, who is a Tampa guy. So that one isn't a recycle. But then you have Florida going with Paul Maurice. You have Philly going with Tortorella. You have Vegas going with Bruce Cassidy. It's just like so much recycling. And then you have the ones that aren't, Lane Lambert for New York. Like I said, Lalonde for the Red Wings, and then Richardson for the Blackhawks, and Woodcroft for the Oilers. But a lot of recycling done. And I think I'm glad that we aren't likely to see Mike Van Ryn or Steve Ott get a job, but those guys definitely deserve a shot, I think. And I think it's eventually coming. The big one left really is San Jose. I don't know what they're going to do. I wouldn't be that surprised if they did hire one of the Blues assistants, but
please don't say that.
I don't think it's going to happen. it wouldn't surprise. I just don't know what, like, first of all, firing him on July 1st, like that seems extremely late when you've been out of it forever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's weird. So that's what makes me think like they have a guy that they want. Who's that guy is the big question. I can't think of one off the top of my head that makes any sense for a guy that, like, if you like, is it Andrew Brunette who Florida, he was Florida's interim? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of weird. I don't know if I'd just fire my coach in July for Andrew Brunette.
Yeah, there's not a really, in my opinion, there's not a lot of really good, solid answers. There's been a couple of guys, and I can't come up with any of them here like off the top of my head, that I've been hearing just through a couple of different other podcasts here through like the Swedish elite leagues and whatnot. Just some guys potentially coming here overseas, but it's just weird. It's weird timing. I don't know. It's San Jose. I'm not putting a whole heck of a lot of stock into it.
Yeah. What I find absurd is that some of these teams actually kept their coaches. Is like New Jersey. Lindy Ruff has shown nothing there. Like they've been terrible. They should not have been as bad as they were last season. So that's kind of just looking at the entire league. But it's very odd to me that that we see a guy fired on July 1st after with a team that was that bad. So that's very weird to me. But we'll move on from that. We got some Blues updates. I believe Doug Armstrong spoke with the media earlier this week.
Yep.
For the most part, I don't think you take much away from what he says because we all know he's a guy that keeps the cards close to the vest. He's not going to give you much, but he did give us a few interesting things to talk about, including one very unfortunate update.
Yeah, Alexei Toropchenko, who we were penciling in for about a third line role here this season, you know, at the very least a fourth line role. He's going to be out until roughly early December with shoulder surgery. And I just, did anybody move up the depth chart higher and faster than Alexei Toropchenko? I mean, he turned 23 here on June 25th. He played in 28 regular season games and including all 12 playoff contests. He scored twice in the regular season, 2 assists in the postseason. So his offensive production, that's not a huge concern to me. It's just not. He's got the size, the speed, the physicality. If he can develop a little bit more of a scoring touch, I mean, I would love it. And I think the Blues would really have themselves something there. But this is really a guy that, boy, that's a rough one. And they did say that they had another guy that needed to be able to have some, quote, tidy up surgery with Nathan Walker and his wrist. But to his knowledge, Toropchenko is the only player who is going to be expected to miss time once training camp starts. So that's at least good news that you will be able to see Nathan Walker back here for training camp and ready to start the season.
Yeah, this is an interesting situation for a lot of depth guys like Joshua and Brown and Walker. It makes me think that the idea, because I am going to be doing a 8-step plan for a perfect offseason for the Blues article in the hockeywriters.com. And one of those things in there is I think that signing a bona fide veteran fourth line center makes a ton of sense. And we talked about it a few weeks ago. I don't think Bozak is the guy per se, but I think somebody like a Nick Bjugstad or somebody like that could be a very solid addition, just because as good as Joshua's been in terms of what you want from him, I don't think that I would love him being the fourth line center every night. Like, I think you need somebody there and then make the rest of those guys compete for their jobs. Walker, Brown, Joshua, all those guys. And then Toropchenko, I think, unless the fourth line is so good that you can't break it up, Toropchenko should be right in there when he's back. He's earned that.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you never want to be able to see injury be a good thing, but I think in this case, it could present a good thing for a guy like Jake Neighbors, who should be competing and should be able to make the Blues starting roster here this season. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what is going to be able to happen here from this, and the fact that they're going to not have a guy like Toropchenko. But man, he's going to be missed. He's definitely going to be missed.
I wonder if it makes them rethink trading a guy like Barbashev, because if you trade Barbashev, do you trust somebody like Neighbors if you don't pick anybody else up? Do you trust somebody like Neighbors? You just throw him onto the third line, which I'm totally fine with, because I think if he's going to play, you can't be having him play 7 or 8 minutes a night. You took him in the first round. He's got to be playing at least 12, I would think.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it makes them rethink that. Maybe. I know it's only December, so that's what, probably 2.5 months of the season. Worst case, he comes back in the new year. That's 3 months. It's not that many games, even though I believe they're going back to a much earlier October start this season, which I think is good for the league. But we'll see. But Toropchenko definitely earned a spot when he's healthy. So that's the good thing for him. And hopefully there's no complications with this surgery, because I think if the article I read is correct, that it's similar to the Tarasenko surgery in terms of what they're doing. So it's a bit of a concern with that. But I think he'll be just fine. He's a different player than Tarasenko too. That's another thing. He's much bigger. So I think he can kind of avoid some of the things that other players can't when they're smaller, but I don't know.
Hopefully he asked Tarasenko who he went through for all of his surgeries and said, we're not going with that guy.
Yeah, you would think so. Moving right along.
Yeah, they also said, there's no updates here regarding the team's unrestricted free agents here at this time. We would have loved to have heard something a little bit more, at least regarding David Perron. But like you said, he likes to be able to keep his cards a little bit closer to the chest. I'm not really expecting much here from Tyler Bozak. I'm not really expecting much here from Ville Husso. These guys are all ones that we're expecting to move right along. But David Perron was one that we're hoping to hear a little bit more from. But again, not surprising here at this point.
Yeah, I know that Armstrong really likes Ville Husso. I just don't think that's going to happen unless we're way off on what he actually is on the open market. I don't see how there's any way that happens for Bozak. I think if he's not signing a 1-year here or somewhere else, you got to think he hangs him up. Leddy, I think, is a guy you let hit the open market, and if an offer for him is too strong for you to match, I think you let him go and then you explore other options. I wouldn't be that surprised if the Blues do make somewhat of a significant move in and around the draft, because last season, right before the draft, they make the Buchnevich trade. And I believe it was Steven's article from earlier this week on the hockeywriters.com that stated pretty much there's no reason to wait to make some of these moves. Like, you got to get after it. And I think Armstrong's going to do that if he wants to improve in any way. Now, the biggest issue is the Scandella deal, but I believe there is a date for when you have to be you have to be under the salary cap or within that. Like, I think you can go over the cap during the summer, and then there's a certain date where you have to be under, I think. Yeah.
It's usually, I believe, about plus 10% here at that point. I think they give you a little bit of flexibility at that point, but and as we've seen in the past, Armstrong tends to be that guy who really wants to be aggressive with some of these trades and wants to get stuff addressed, especially, sooner rather than later. Number of different conversations here, especially before like the trade for Shen, the Buchnevich trade. You've seen him really pushing and having these side conversations with general managers here, especially at the draft. And so many different of these beat writers are looking around and saying, Armstrong just went off with this guy. Armstrong just went off with that guy. He's on the phone. He's doing this. So I don't think it's Armstrong that's necessarily the issue. And I think it's the other general managers who may be kind of dragging their feet a little bit and trying to see if they can potentially squeeze something else out here of it or anything else at that point. But yeah, I agree. I mean, sooner rather than later here is going to be the best thing, but it's going to be the other guys because, of course, you need 2 to tango here at this point. So.
Well, I also think that, my philosophy, anytime you could trade with Chuck Fletcher and the Philadelphia Flyers, you do it.
Do it.
So Provorov or Sanheim would be perfect because you're probably giving up nothing because that's how they operate over there, which they've probably had the most insane offseason already. Especially, what a circus. You got a terrible GM. You got a head coach with, whatever Tortorella is at this point.
Yeah.
I think we know how insane that could get. And you're telling me that Johnny Gaudreau is going to want to play there? I don't care where he's from. I don't care how good him and Kevin Hayes are as friends. That's a total circus. And to cap it off, like I said, you have the worst GM in the league.
Yeah. And
unbelievable.
for some people like who may have not been able to follow here at this point, it's been 1 week into the offseason. Ryan Ellis, who was supposed to be essentially their number one defenseman, has not made any strides in his rehab or his recovery. I especially don't like that because I have him in a dynasty league, but that's neither here nor there. Joel Farabee is out for 3 to 4 months with a back injury. Their most promising goaltending prospect, Ivan Fedotov, is being forced to go to war and is having some military issues here with the Russian government. And it's been 1 week. It's been 1 week at this point. And so, I even reached out to a couple of the writers here over there and just asked them, what do they have in a guy like Provorov? Because with it being the Eastern Conference, like, I don't really watch that as much. I don't really watch the Flyers as closely. And so I just wanted to be able to ask them, what are they seeing in this guy? And so what they did say was that the problem certainly has something to do with how they haven't gotten him an adequate partner, which is not his fault. And that's completely fair. When he was paired up with Ryan Ellis, he looked really good. So he came able to play these top minutes, but again, he is better to be paired with a guy like Matt Niskanen or Ryan Ellis, that veteran defenseman. He hasn't been an elite defenseman as the organization has envisioned he could be when they drafted him, and they seem to think that a change of scenery would benefit him. So the question that I posed was, has he reached a performance ceiling, or was it simply a systematic ceiling here more than anything? Because those are two very, very different questions. So the Blues, who have been linked to a guy like Provorov, would be a very good fit here. And I think on paper would be able to match along with a guy like Colton Parayko, veteran defenseman, plays a very sound game, can be able to feed Ivan Provorov here the puck. Boom, you can be able to put some pucks here in the back of the net, be able to set up some great plays here between he and then another line here with Torrey Krug. I think it could be able to work. But then again, we thought that a guy like Torrey Krug would be able to really match well with a guy like Colton Parayko, and it just never panned out. So it really just depends. You can be able to do all the planning here in the world. Again, if you think that it's a systematic change, great, you can be able to make that change. But if it's his actual career performance ceiling, there's nothing you can be able to do about that. And so you have to be very, very cautious when you're making these trades, and especially with a guy like Ivan Provorov, who you think that it may just be a poor situation in Philly, then comes to a little bit of a better system here in St. Louis. Is it going to work? And that's always the double-edged sword here with a trade.
Yeah. I just think that you probably get Provorov for way less than what you think because of the guy who's running the show there. So that would be the idea there. Like you said, I think he'd be a great fit.
Yeah.
But there's options out there for sure. So we'll see if they can figure that out. But like I said earlier, Jim Montgomery is out the door. Not surprising, well-deserved, but the Blues did name a replacement for him as well.
Yeah, they ended up signing, they ended up bringing in Craig McTavish here as his replacement. Armstrong here in his press conference here did say that he likes the process here with Craig Berube of identifying people that they may want to end up joining their staff. Craig McTavish's name was at the top of the list when they started that process. And he said about McTavish that when he walks into a room, the room just gets brighter. The knowledge is 4 Stanley Cups, coaching, managing, being in every aspect of the game. It's going to be someone everyone's going to enjoy working with. So for those who may not know, McTavish, who has played in 2 NHL seasons here with the Blues, 95-97, he brings over 10 years of coaching experience here to the staff. So I do think that the addition of Craig McTavish is going to be very well received. It'll just depend, will he and Berube mix well? Will they complement here one another? And I'm of the notion that he will, but we'll see.
I agree. I think he's joining an established staff. Like I said earlier, Van Ryan and Steve Ott and Montgomery last season, I would argue they were a top 5 coaching staff in the league. Mm-hmm. And you lose Montgomery, which, obviously him going to Boston, that's great for Boston. It's great for him. We wish him nothing but the best. I wrote in my article that's coming out on Monday, Blues Weekly article, that you can't say enough great things for how Montgomery handled himself and how he was in St. Louis. He ran the power play. The Blues had the second best power play in the regular season last year. That was after losing a guy who they had as a power play specialist the year before with Mike Hoffman. So Montgomery was great here, and definitely wish him nothing but the absolute best. And the McTavish pickup makes sense. This is a guy that's been pretty much involved in hockey at every level. He was a player. He was a coach for Edmonton for 8 seasons. Then he was in Edmonton's front office, and then he was a broadcaster. And then he coached in the American Hockey League for Chicago. He coached in the KHL. So he's pretty much been every single place you could be. And this will be his first time behind an NHL bench in 13 years. So I think this is a great hire. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the philosophies line up very well. If McTavish is the same way that he's really always been in terms of whether it was coaching or broadcasting or playing, I think that this will be a great fit. And I think they made the right choice. I don't really think there was much of another choice unless you had, a recent head coach who Berube knew or would have made more sense. But I think this makes all the sense in the world, and I think it'll work out quite well. Yeah. So let's go to the next and the final thing on the Blues updates.
Yeah, the last final thing here that Armstrong let everybody know here was that prospect Zach Balduke also had minor injury here left over from his junior season. That's why he was, quote, sent back after being assigned here to the Springfield Thunderbirds for the playoffs, and he didn't get into any sort of Calder Cup games. The Blues didn't want to risk it, and reasonably so. He is one of your top prospects here at this point. You don't want to be able to further cause further injury here to him. So, he's just going to have minor surgery here at this point. I don't know if he's going to be ready for the prospect training camp. It would not surprise me if he's not. At least he could be there, but it wouldn't surprise me if he's not playing really like here at all. So I'll be interested to see what he would look like if he is invited to the actual NHL training camp here as well.
Yeah, and speaking of which, it did stink to see the T-Birds go down the way that they did.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, but Chicago is a very veteran team, good goaltending, kind of took control of the series. Mm-hmm. But great season for the Thunderbirds, lots to build on. I think that they'll be good again next season. And this was definitely the right move to not have Bolduc go in there because you know how playoff games can get. And I think, sending him back was the right move. Mm-hmm. But I think him being at training camp makes sense. I think that could happen this year and see where he's at. I think that would make a ton of sense to figure that out, especially since he was drafted last year. You get him in there this year, kind of get him acclimated. He's obviously not going to play for the Blues this year, but this would be, I think, a strong move if he's healthy to have him in training camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially a guy who's a volume shooter here like Balduc. He could be with the Blues sooner than later, but just like Jake Neighbors, he needs to be at least in the top 9 forward lines as opposed to like a bottom 6, like a checking role or something. I think his promise is going to be something of a more of an offensive side rather than a defensive side here of things. But somebody like Balduc is somebody to be really excited about here moving forward.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right, let's get into the final segment of the show, which is the NHL Draft, which is coming up on July 7th and the 8th. Thursday, Friday draft this year, which I think is great for the league. I'm assuming it'll be on ESPN in the States. I don't really know why it wouldn't. Yeah. But this will be very fun to watch as the Blues have the 23rd pick in the first round. And then they have a few other picks after that, of course, 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, I believe. Mm-hmm. Picks in all rounds except for the 2nd and the 7th. So we're going to go over a few players that we think could make sense at 23. I will just start with mine here. The first one that I have is Seamus Casey, who is a U.S. National Development Program player, defenseman, committed to Michigan. Quality, undersized defenseman. 5'10", 170, two-way defender. He has the defensive ability of a bigger player, and he's quality, solid on the offensive end. Grows into the body a little bit more, becomes even stronger as a two-way player, especially when playing at Michigan, which is kind of becoming a big program in hockey. Look at the team they had last season, even though they didn't get it done and win it all. They were loaded last season with the likes of Owen Power and Matty Beniers, and they were stacked last season. So him going there, I think, is great. I think he can make a lot of sense for the Blues at 23. The second one is Yager Furcus from the Moose Jaw Warriors in the WHL. Great name, great shot, likely to project as a top 6 forward. I don't think I see him being there at 23, but the beauty of the NHL draft is you never really know. So I think that's a good pick. He'll play the right side probably in terms of a wing. Then the other one will be a left winger in Isaac Howard, another U.S. National Development Program player committed to Minnesota Duluth. He is about as good of a goal scoring talent in the middle of the first round as you're going to find. And I think he has the ability to be a playmaker as well. I think he's got some of the best well-rounded and overall offensive talents of any player in this draft in the first round, especially. And he would be a great pick at 23, I think. And going to Minnesota Duluth should be good for him as well to develop. Obviously, Scott Perunovich was a stud there, different position, different player, but another Blues prospect that has come through the ranks and looked good when getting the chance, of course. Then the fourth one I wrote is Leon Bischel, who is from the Swedish Hockey League. Big body defenseman, 6'5", 225, potentially elite defensive defenseman at the next level, but I think it could be a tough sell at 23 with the value. But I think a lot of Blues fans have brought him up in conversations I've seen that they like him. But I think it's kind of a tough sell for me at 23. He's pretty much just a defensive guy at this point. I think he could develop a little bit more, but I think you got some potential there with him and Parayko if they played together down the road with that big of a duo, kind of a duo that you can't get by. Like if Parayko is what he was a few years ago, that's a guy you can't really get around unless it's like McDavid, which is just a different world. But they can get him. I think he'd be great next to Parayko if he develops properly and Parayko returns to what he is or has been. But it's kind of a tough sell for me at 23 with Leon Bischel. So I don't know.
Well, and to your point here about size, as we saw in the playoffs, you don't need size really to be able to stop a guy like Connor McDavid. Again, Cale Makar is the exception to the rule here, but when Cale Makar can backskate enough to be able to stop a guy like Connor McDavid, there's ways to be able to stop him without being big. Granted, size really helps, but you have to be able to be quick here at that point in time too. So I've got a couple guys here as well. And like we were talking about here before the podcast was there's so much volatility within all of these draft projections. Leon Bischel, he's all over the place here as far as his projections, 35, 24, 19, 33, 47, not even in the top 3 rounds. He's just all over the place. And that's a number of these guys where they're just bouncing all up and down the first and second rounds that, this is, I think, the draft class that has been the most affected by COVID. They've lost an entire year here at this point, had a shortened season, and it's just, you have no idea about some of these guys. And so somewhat drafting them, it's almost just like just blind guessing. You have a lot to go based off of, but there's also not enough at the same point in time too, which is where I think choosing even some of the guys that we were picking here at, I like Leon Bischel, but I'm also skeptical here about him. You just don't know. I like a guy, defenseman Owen Pickering. He's a left-handed defenseman, 6'4", 180 pounds. He's got good size, good speed. Often he was leading the team here in the defensive exits, entries, transitioning play here into the offensive end. I really like him, but at the same point in time, he's a little bit more limited. Is he going to be like a top 4? His offensive ability is a little bit more, again, it's limited. 9 goals, 33 points here in 62 games in the WHL sounds good, but do you want to be able to spend a first-round draft pick on him? A guy like Rutger McGroarty in his left wing, who's a left wing, could be a lot better of an option. He has been, again, all over the place at, where did I see him? 27, 22, 23, 16, 20, just all over the place. And for the Blues, I think left wing makes a lot of sense because as of right now, you've got Jake Neighbors, and that's about it. If you look down their depth chart, that's about it. And so he may not fall to 23, but boy, oh boy, would he be, I'd be running up to the board, I think, if McGroarty was available here at 23. He's well-rounded, slick hands. He's got a heavy shot, good size here too at 6'1", 205, and he competes hard. He's projected to be a top 6 foot scorer here in the NHL. He served on as a captain here to his team, but his versatility made him so valuable to his coaching staff. He can play any single forward position. So what is there not to love about a guy here like this? You know, the only thing that's really holding him back from not being a top 5 to top 10, in my opinion here, is his inability to beat defenders one-on-one here with his speed. So his limitations as a skater do hold him back in his effectiveness here in transition, forcing him to be able to play more of a grinding, slower pace. So does this transition well into the NHL? Does it transition well here as a top 6? Does it transition well here as a first round pick? You don't know. So that's where even a guy like centerman Yuri Kulich, he probably boosted his draft pick, his draft rank higher than anybody else here within this top class. He is well built at 5'11", 180 pounds. Again, he's a centerman, which would pan out, decent size here for a centerman. You like him to be a little bit taller at that point, but, not too bad. He has 9 goals and 11 points over 6 games. Saw him named the U18 Worlds Tournament here MVP, despite coming up short here for a medal. His key asset is that he has a very heavy and accurate one-timer, which I would take that all day, every day. But on top of that, he can let it rip, and goaltenders seem to have problems finding it, including with his wrist shot here as well. So a guy like him, I would love to be able to take. And as my final one, another centerman here, Philip Messar, a little bit shorter here on center at 5'9", 175 pounds. Give this guy a cheeseburger or something like that here at this point. He could be a third Slovakian player to be taken here in the first round. I wouldn't be surprised to see him drop a little bit in the second round. It'd be a high second round pick here at that, but he could be the third Slovak to be taken here. His bread and butter is a smooth skating, strong playmaking ability here at this. So give me a guy who's a good playmaker, a guy like a Robert Thomas who can just be able to feed these guys just over and over and over again. I don't care if he's a little bit shorter. We have seen that short guys, especially quick ones, can really be able to make it very, very well and succeed very well here in the NHL, especially as the game is transitioning to faster paces. So when he has the puck, he is always has his eyes up, scanning the ice for open teammates and a lane to feed the puck through. So all in all, if you want to be able to kind of recap the TDLR, at this point, the Blues are going to have options. I could see every single one of these players that you and I, Ethan, that we laid out available, but I could see every single one of these guys for whatever reason being taken, and none of them are available. So this draft is going to be super, super interesting here for the Blues come Thursday night.
I have a feeling they're not going to take any of these guys, just because that's usually how these things go.
Yeah, we're going to be way off.
They're going to end up taking, somebody who most people view as like a middle of the second round guy. They're just going to take him in the first. I can see that happening.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting for sure. We'll see how the central scouting rankings affect this, because I think there's some guys that GMs view higher than those rankings, or the media does as well. You never know what's going to happen with that. But let's finish this off here with, you look at the third and the fourth round for the Blues. The third round pick is 88 and the fourth round pick is 120. So I got 3 guys from my articles, target pieces. And I gotta be honest, I'm not enthralled with some of these defensemen in the middle rounds. I'm not impressed by like any of them. So I think if you're going to get a defenseman, you got to take one of the upper tier guys that's available at 23. That's where I'm like, if you're going to take a defenseman in this draft, you take Bichel if he's there at 23, just because of that, because I think the middle round defenseman for me, from what I looked at for what could be available for the Blues, does not impress me in the third round. It's a little bit different than what it's been in the last few years. Pickering, if he's there, you take him. Casey, if he's there, you take him. I think that's how you got to view this right now from the defensive perspective. So in the third round, I wrote Matthew Ward, who's a center from the Swift Current Broncos. And Ian Kennedy of the Hockey News said this of him. He is a small player with big talent at 5'8". Ward oozes competitiveness and never plays small, calm with the puck. His hockey IQ and vision allow him to find success beyond his stature. He is dynamic, and that alone will earn Ward a shot at the NHL someday. That sounds like a Blues player to me. I think that would be a great acquisition. Now, the size probably scares them a little bit. The Blues aren't really the type of team that takes those smaller players unless the talent is overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of an example of that off the top of my head per se in the middle rounds over the last few years, except there is some guys that they have done that with, but the talent's got to be there. And I think for a guy like Matthew Ward, it is there. But you do have to worry about that size a little bit in terms of what is he going to, like, what's the ceiling there when you're 5'8"? I mean, if you can't score a ton, I think that's where you're a little bit concerned about what he could project as, but I'm not too worried about that overall. I think that'd be a great selection at 88. Another one is Servac Petrovsky, who's a center from it's probably Servac, by the way, Petrovsky, if I had to guess. Center from the Owen Sound Attack of the OHL. Don't see him falling here, but he's one of the better Slovak prospects in this draft. The quote here is from Dale DeGray, who is the Owen Sound Attack general manager. Smooth skating high school forward who has always done extremely well against his peer group and same age. He will bring an offensive flair to his game. So I think that would be a great pickup if he's actually there. I don't see it though. Peter Baracchini's ranking in May has him 95th. So 120 is going to be a hard spot, or I guess 88 or 120 could be a hard spot to get him. Because I think teams are going to like him more than a lot of the media does. Other than the defenseman I wrote down was Ludwig Jansen, whatever. I don't like him that much, to be honest. Smooth skating defender, strong two-way game, dynamic skater. He was so bad in the hockey Allsvenskan or whatever it's called, which that's not a high tier league in Sweden. It's the second tier. The Swedish Hockey League is the first tier. The team that he was on was really bad, but he also was not good. So that scares me a lot. So I don't love that guy in terms of a pick there, but I wrote him down anyway to have a defenseman in there. Then for the fourth round, Cole Spicer, a winger from the U.S. National Development Program, grew into his game a ton. The quote is, he plays an energetic yet responsible two-way game despite his small stature. He competes hard and gets into the dirty areas around the opposing net, shows good vision with the ability to make quick decisions in the offensive zone. And though he may not be the flashiest playmaker, he consistently makes a smart read to string plays together and sustain possessions for his team. He will probably never be the main offensive driver on his line, but he has the hockey IQ to be a strong complementary piece alongside skilled players. A lot of that sounds like a Blues player to me. So that makes sense. The next one is, yeah, that's true. Zam Plant or Plante or Planty, one of the three pronunciations probably. Just kind of a hockey player of the year, dominant in high school. Hermantown High School, 64 points, 22 games. So that seems good, even though it is high school hockey. His hockey's in his blood, though. His father played 8 seasons in the NHL. His grandfather was a legendary hockey coach in Hermantown, Minnesota. The quote from Roger Grillo or Grillo, one of the two, under 18 Team USA general manager. Zam is a really is it Zam or Zam? I mean, it's what are these names, people? He plays the game with a lot of creativity. He sees the ice and he makes other players better. He plays with pace. And the most impressive thing about him is that he has high-end skill level, but also competes consistently. That will help our team, and it bodes well for him in the future. Blues player, another one. I think you could probably almost say anything about a player. I say that's a Blues player, but whatever. I don't know. And then the other one is Philip Nordberg, defenseman. Once again, not that impressed with these defensemen, so I'm not even going to talk about him. We'll see. He's 52nd on the Central Scouting ranking in Europe, so maybe he'll be there at 120, maybe he won't. All I know is the Blues have 5 picks in this draft. And here's a rapid fire question before we wrap this up. Will the Blues trade one of these picks or make a trade the day before, the day of, or the day after the draft?
No, I think they're going to hold on to every single one of their picks.
I tend to agree. I think the exception would be one of the defensemen being traded. But I think unless something quickly changes, I feel like that's probably a early free agency or pre-free agency situation in terms of that deal or a deal being made there. The good thing is, like I said, with the salary cap in the offseason, you can make this trade and then find a trade for Scandella. Because I don't think there's really a point in using Scandella in a Chychrun trade or a Provorov trade or a Sanheim trade. Because like you said a couple podcasts ago, he does have that no team trade clause. So
yeah, and that's what's going to limit the Blues on what they're able to do. So
now I believe the player has to submit that at a certain date. So the Blues probably have that. The big question is a team like Philadelphia on there? Because I think Chuck Fletcher probably thinks Marco Scandella is like the next Ray Bourque. So
he's thinking he's the bee's knees.
So I feel like you might be able to trick him into thinking that Scandella is good. Because, I mean, if Buffalo was able to trick him into thinking Ristolainen was good, I think you can almost do anything, especially Buffalo. That is something. So I feel like we've probably – it's really just me. I don't know if I've gone too far against Chuck Fletcher. I wonder if any Flyers fans listen to this and agree with me. If you do, you should tweet us or leave a rating. I mean, nothing against the Flyers here, just their GM's terrible. So, but they will be a team to watch with Tortorella's antics next season.
I still don't understand how Tortorella has a job in the NHL. I get it. I get it.
He was hired by the most incompetent GM in the sport.
Yeah.
A GM that has made some of the most just ridiculous moves in the league. Like it's absurd how bad some of these moves have been. Like Kevin Hayes, I like him a lot. Seems like a great guy. Has had a solid career, but that contract is absurd.
Right.
It's really something how many ridiculous. That's just kind of when you're desperate. I guess that's what happens, but we'll see what happens. I mean, giving Ristolainen a 5-year deal is a tough move at $5.1 million. That's going to be a tough one. So we'll see if the Blues make any deals with the Flyers. That'll be interesting to see if they do. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but we'll see. So we'll be back this week. We will be back talking about the draft. We got some plans to do some stuff in and around the draft. So we got all that coming up, and then free agency preview at the end of next week, or the end of this week, I guess. The 10th, probably the date on that one that we'll record. It'll probably be uploaded on the 11th, but lots coming. Big free agency, big summer ahead in the NHL. So I think that's it for us in this one. We'll see you on the next episode of the Blue Note Podcast, episode 14, coming next on the Believe Network. Make sure to follow and subscribe, all that good stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at Ethan Carter SW. You can follow Mike on Twitter at
Danger Powers 19.
And we'll see everybody next time on the Blue Note Podcast. We'll see you next time for episode 14.